I want to just say real quickly, here in about 15 minutes, the two astronauts who have been stranded on the International Space Station since June of last year are scheduled to return here in just about 15 minutes. So that will actually happen perhaps while we're still on the air. And I just encourage you to be praying for them even right now as they are about to come back to Earth. All right, there's been a lot of international news in the headlines today and in recent weeks, from Israel to Russia, Yemen to Venezuela. And while it may not be on the front pages today, it's no secret that China has also expanded its power and its influence far beyond their own borders. I mean, look, they've asserted control over Hong Kong, over Taiwan. They've used their financial incentives from their Belt and Road Initiative to try to gain favor with foreign nations across the world. And the United States remains their primary adversary. But for how long? What if China actually tried to take on the United States? How would that play out? And would they even be able to succeed? Well, these are questions that are tackled in a brand new political thriller novel titled The Beijing Betrayal. The Beijing Betrayal. The author, the great Joel Rosenberg, joins me today to discuss this book and more. Joel, of course, is the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the news organizations All Israel News and All Arab News. He also hosts the Rosenberg Report on TBN. Joel, as always, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great honor to have you again.
Thank you, Jody. Great to be with you. I appreciate it very much.
Well, listen, before we dive into your book, which I absolutely want to, I did want to get your thoughts, your insights on the latest developments in the Israel-Hamas war. 2-month-long ceasefire is over. Your thoughts on all of this?
Yeah, well, we've been warning about this for weeks now on All Israel News at allisrael.com because my sense of it was, and I live in Israel, I live in Jerusalem, I'm in Indianapolis right now. I was interviewing and having lunch today with former Vice President Mike Pence, so I'm not home, and I'm on this book tour for the Beijing Betrayal. But I've been warning that we were going back to war, and the reason is because Hamas does not want to give us back all the remaining hostages. There's 59 hostages. We believe that 24 of them or so are still alive. The rest are dead bodies killed by Hamas. The problem is we always knew we were going to get to a point where Hamas would not deal. Why? Because once they give us all the final hostages back, they know we are going to destroy them unless they negotiate some pathway to leave Gaza forever and never come back. So this is a challenge. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and his government wants every hostage back, and have been very grateful for President Trump and his special envoy Steve Witkoff, who negotiated the deal that has gotten all the first phase hostages out. We're very grateful to the president and to Steve Witkoff for this, but Trump and Witkoff have been trying now for weeks to get a new deal, to extend this deal, to get all the rest of the hostages back. And Hamas has said no twice. And Netanyahu said, look, I'm not going to sit around and just not fight them while we continue negotiating. And they keep saying no. I thought, Jody, that this might not happen for another month or so after Ramadan, maybe after Passover. But Netanyahu decided to take the gloves off and strike when Hamas least expected it.
Which is not surprising coming from Netanyahu. He's just a brilliant thinker in terms of always seemingly getting the other side off guard. So let me ask you, Joel, how do you see this latest turn of events impacting the negotiations for peace in the region? You talked about the process moving towards phase 2, and now we have this interruption. What kind of impact is this going to have, you think?
Well, Jody, it's a little bit hard to say for certain right now. Why? Because Netanyahu is right, I think. Let's be clear. He's a brilliant strategist in many ways, sees himself as the Winston Churchill of Israel up against the Iran threat. But let's admit it. Prime Minister Netanyahu was completely blindsided on October 7th, 2023, as was all of the Israeli security and intelligence establishment. So he, he's got a serious blemish on his record, but he is trying to fight this war and win it. And President Biden was trying to tie his hands behind, Netanyahu's hands behind his back. But here's the thing, by striking now when nobody expected it, including Hamas, that was a brilliant move. The question is whether Netanyahu is trying, in partnership with President Trump, to get Hamas to come back and give up more hostages, and that Netanyahu would say, okay, I'll pause fighting if you're going to start letting people out. Or if Netanyahu has decided there's really no other option, Hamas has essentially given up any possibility of giving any more hostages back. So I don't know the answer to that question. I do believe at some point, whether it's right now or in a few weeks, we're going back to war to finish Hamas off, to vanquish them forever and ever and ever. And then, as you know, Jody, President Trump surprised us all a few weeks ago by saying, we're going to make Gaza great again. We're going to take it. We're going to own it. It's going to be fantastic. But first, Bibi's got to win. And so we're thinking, wow, that the president has made a huge commitment to helping us get Gaza right. But it is our responsibility in Israel to win. And President Trump is giving us all the tools that we need. But we haven't asked Trump to send American ground forces, and we won't. We're going to do this on our own. And I've got two sons that have already served in the Israeli military, and I know the commitment that it takes.
Well, got to tell you, that was an incredible impersonation. You did a terrific job.
That's true. And you know, Jody, that your ratings are going to be higher than Tony's now because it's fantastic that you've had me on. But I'll come on with Tony, too.
And then that'll bump him over me right back where he belongs. All right, if we can now, Joel Rosenberg, great insights that you've just given on Israel-Hamas war. Let's shift gears, if we can, to your new book, fascinating book, The Beijing Betrayal. Is listed as a fictional military thriller. Give us the rundown on this story. I think all of us kind of have in the back of our mind why this has come out. But from your perspective, give us the rundown.
Sure. And let me just make a note, a shout out to Tony, and really grateful that he was just in Israel. It's, as much as it's important to stand with Israel, it's really important to stand in Israel. And I'm grateful that he and several other evangelical leaders were just over there. So that's fantastic. Look, you know that as a political thriller writer, as well as a journalist, I've dealt with the Iran issue, radical Islam, Russia, Ukraine, North Korea, but I have never actually written a political thriller that has dealt with the communist China threat. And as one of my sons who served in Israeli intelligence, military intelligence, he said, Dad, look, we get it. You get the threats from other places, but if you're not dealing with the communist China threat, you're missing a major element. And it took me several years to spend time with major intelligence officials, former CIA directors, and so forth, to figure out what's the right angle, what's the right story. The Beijing Betrayal tells the story of communist China being not years away from invading our democratic ally of Taiwan, but just hours away, days away. At the same time, my main character, Marcus Riker, a former Marine, former Secret Service agent turned elite CIA operative, he not only comes across this plot of communist China attacking and trying to devour Taiwan and thus unravel the entire American supremacy doctrine and alliance in the Pacific. But communist China is also about to unleash a horrific Ebola-like virus inside the United States before the attack on Taiwan. Why? To paralyze the United States, to kill millions of Americans, and make us unable or unwilling to defend not just Taiwan, but our other allies, South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, Singapore, and so forth. So thank God this has not actually happened yet, and I'm not predicting that it will, but The Beijing Betrayal is a worst-case scenario thriller about what could happen if America gets our eye off the ball, or political leaders inside Washington, certainly inside the White House, Pentagon, State, Capitol Hill, decide, yeah, Taiwan is a nice country, but it's not necessary. We're talking about a total catastrophe if Communist China were to get Taiwan, because it really unravels our entire alliance in the Pacific. No one will believe us, not just in the Pacific, but in Europe or in Israel, that you're going to defend an ally if we don't defend Taiwan. But we'd rather figure out a strategy of deterrence against Communist China than actually have to go into war with Communist China, because that would likely lead to nuclear war. And that's the scenario that the Beijing Betrayal worries about and envisions.
Yeah, and not just the Beijing Betrayal, but many of us have been looking at this for a long, long time, recognizing fully that China is a major threat, not only to the United States, but globally. So what do you think, is there a way now, as you said, preemptively to stop an invasion of Taiwan from the Chinese?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that nobody's been tougher on Communist China than President Trump. That was a conversation I was actually having with over lunch today, and in my interview for my Rosenberg Report show on TBN with the former Vice President, Mike Pence. Now, obviously, Trump and Pence see the world a little differently today, but on China, they're unified. It was very interesting and refreshing to hear Pence praising Trump, that Trump gets the threat from China. The challenge is that last year during the campaign, Trump said several things like, well, Taiwan's a long way away, and I don't know if so it suggested that maybe he was softening his defense and support of Taiwan. I don't know if that's really true, and neither does Pence. I mean, the one theory is that Trump is trying to get Taiwan to pay attention and start spending more on its own defense. It was under 3% until recently. Now Taiwan has agreed to move it up to 3%. But Elbridge Colby, who's being nominated to be the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy for Trump and is a great China expert, told the Senate confirmation hearing they need to be at 10%. We can't be more supportive of Taiwanese defense than the people of Taiwan, right? So whether it has to be 10%, 5%, 7%, I can't tell you for certain. But we do have to persuade the people of Taiwan and all of our allies in the Pacific, it's cheaper to invest in your defense now than to create a perception of weakness, and where you're totally depending on the United States and you're not doing your own hard work and spending your own money to defend yourselves. We're with you, but we're not going to just let you, be freeloaders off the American taxpayer and the American military.
Great
so
point.
I absolutely think that we've got to help the Taiwanese and others in the region step up their game, just like J.D. Vance went to Europe and told the Europeans and NATO, guys, we're going to be with you unless you won't be with yourselves. Step it up. And I think that is the right message.
I do too. So what do you think about China, not only the threats to Taiwan and so forth, but their attempts to cozy up, if you will, with other American adversaries like Russia, like Iran? What is the underlying reason that China is making these moves with other U.S. adversaries?
Jody, that's a great question. I think that's the heart of the right question to ask, which is, and then that's really the premise of the Beijing Betrayal, which is it's not just Communist China as a threat to a specific island, a specific region. It's the fact that Communist China wants to, A, supplant the United States as the world's superpower, B, just ultimately destroy the United States. That's part of their central doctrine. They're atheists, they're communists, they hate God, they hate Christians, they hate anybody that loves Jesus, even though there's a great spiritual awakening going on inside China. But because Xi Jinping has this ambition of first dominating the Pacific and then dominating the Middle East and then dominating the world over time, he's making strong alliances with the Russians and with the Iranians because they hate us too. Just a few years ago, Communist China formed a 25-year strategic and very dangerous alliance with Iran, the most dangerous terror sponsor on the planet, against Israel and against our Sunni Arab allies. This is dangerous. It's not just China by itself. It's the evil empire alliance that they're building. Literally just on Friday, Jody, the leaders, not quite at the top, but just below the top of Russia, Iran, and China met where? In Beijing, in China, to strengthen this anti-American, anti-freedom alliance. And this is, I call it the evil empire summit, and it's incredibly dangerous. The Beijing betrayal is about what happens if we don't pay attention.
I encourage everybody, get a copy of the Beijing Betrayal. Thank you so much, Joel Rosenberg, co-founder and editor-in-chief of All Israel News and All Arab News, as well as host of the Rosenberg Report. And I will tell everyone, the astronauts just splashed down.